Hello, and welcome to the Sci-Fi Christians Paradise Lost analysis. I'm Ben DeBono. We're looking at Book 6 of Paradise Lost today. This is an interesting book because it is our, kind of the big war in heaven, of course. And I think that in content, anyway, this is the one, we've been pointing out all these different parallels to Homer and some to Virgil and everything. And there's still moments like that where it's like these direct echoes, but in terms of content, Book 6 is the one that is most like the Iliad, most like the battle scenes in the Aeneid. It really harkens back to that kind of classical warfare that Homer makes so famous in his poetry, right? So whereas the elements of Homer are going to be throughout Paradise Lost in terms of echoes and homages and all this stuff, the actual content of Paradise Lost is quite a bit different, except for here in Book 6, where we really do have a sort of classical warfare. And we'll notice some of these elements going forward. I mean, if you note the style of warfare that for the most part is depicted among the angels, certainly in the first part of the battle, I mean, before we start having mountains dropped on each other and everything, which we'll get to some of those anomalies a bit later. But you'll notice that the style of warfare is more in the classical Greek type of warfare than a medieval warfare or post-medieval warfare of Milton's time. So he's not writing with what for him would be modern warfare in mind. He's writing, again, with a couple of exceptions that we'll get to later, but he's writing more in the sense of trying to draw out this kind of classical Homeric style of warfare, right? So you have legions of angels with bronzed armor and shields and spears, very, very Homeric. Okay, so just a couple of things before we start to get into all the specifics of this book and kind of walk ourselves through the action that I want to note. There is one not Homeric call out, but actually one to Hesiod. Hesiod, who unfortunately I have not had a chance to read a great deal, but I'm familiar with this scene in his where he depicts Nyx and Hemera, the gods, or the deistic representations of day and night, are kind of in this room, cave, what have you, and when Nyx comes in, Hemera comes out. When Hemera comes in, Nyx comes out. So there's kind of, I mean, that's just meant to mythologically represent the cycle of day and night. You'll notice that right here at the beginning of this book, Milton is going to kind of echo that scene very directly in lines 4 through 8, where he describes the coming and going. So here, again, we have a part of Greek mythology that is repurposed and placed into heaven under a Christian context. Okay? It's also important to note here that as the battle goes on, that this battle is not between Satan and God. This is a point C.S. Lewis makes very clearly, and I think it's a very important one. He makes it in his preface to Paradise Lost, that this battle is between Michael and Gabriel and Satan, the commanders of the angelic army, the commanders of the demonic forces. It's not between Satan and God. And as we'll see, as you know, by assuming you've read Book 6 by now, when not even God in Milton's mind, but when the sun steps in at the end, it's really no contest at that point. The thing is just over. So this battle is allowed by God to go on, but the outcome of the battle is never in doubt. And I think that, I want to talk about this a little bit. It's interesting because Milton is aware of, obviously he's aware of this, that the battle's never in doubt, but his characters are also aware of this. And so we get, this great kind of face-off between Abdiel and Satan in lines 131 to 148. Maybe I'll read that first, and then kind of get into the problem, or seeming problem, at least from a modern audience perspective, of where does the tension come from then when there is really nothing at stake, when these are, there's just two sides going at each other, but the one side has no chance of victory. So let's kind of see how this is represented in the text first, because I think that's important to our answer, and then we'll talk about that problem. So lines 131 to 148, and this is just a great scene. I love, we got a taste of this last time where Abdiel's like, "You ain't great," and now he just comes right back at Satan with all sorts of fun insults. He says, "Proud art thou met." This is Abdiel talking to Satan. "Thy hope was to have reached the height of thy aspiring unopposed, the throne of God unguarded, and his side abandoned at the terror of thy power, O potent tongue. Fool, not to think how vain against the omnipotent to rise in arms." In other words, you think you're just going to walk right up to God's throne and take it? That was a dumb plan. Again, who out of smallest things could without end have raised incessant armies to defeat thy folly, or with solitary hand reaching beyond all limit at one blow, unaided could have finished thee, and whelmed thy legions under darkness. But thou seest all are not of thy train. There be who faith prefer, and piety to God, though then to thee not visible, when I alone seemed in thy world erroneous to dissent from all. My sect thou seest, now learn too late, how few sometimes may know, when thousands err. So, Abda is basically calling out this, what to us as modern audiences may seem a problem, which is that, look, Satan's plan isn't a plan. There's nothing he can do. There's no shot he has of winning this battle. And Abda, where he says it is just perfect in the line where he says that, let me find it again, so this is speaking of God, God out of smallest things could without end have raised incessant armies to defeat thy folly. In other words, even if you kill all us other angels, and get past us, God just snaps his fingers and there's countless armies who are going to rise up and kill you. You're going up against God. You're not going to win, right? So what do we do then with this problem? Because I think for modern audiences, this would be viewed, or could be viewed, as a storytelling error, because it means that there's really nothing at stake in the battle. The outcome is predetermined. It doesn't matter what Satan and Michael and Gabriel on the other side do in the intervening passages. At the end of the day, God is going to win, and there isn't a chance of Satan winning. He will lose. He knows he's going to lose. Everybody knows he's going to lose. Everyone involved in this knows how it's going to go. So what do we do with that? Well, I want to suggest that, this is one of those cases where we really need to step out of our modern storytelling mindset and put ourselves more in a classical mindset. And if you look at classical literature, epic poetry and the like, what you find is that this sort of predeterminism is quite apparent throughout classical literature. I mean, you have a sense in the Iliad. If you go to the Iliad, there's a sense that the Achaeans are doomed without Achilles. So after Achilles, at the beginning of the, did I say the Aeneid? I apologize. The Iliad, at the beginning of the Iliad, the Achaeans are, Achilles gets pissed off at Agamemnon. He goes and sits in his black ships with his myrmidons, and he's not fighting. And what happens in the subsequent books, of course, is that the Achaeans are just absolutely routed. They don't have a shot. So there's the same kind of hopeless predestination going on. On the flip side, ultimately, the Trojans know that their goal is going to fail. They are, they're aware, or at least there is prophecy that exists within the world of the story, that Troy is going to fall. It's been prophesied to fall. So ultimately, no matter what they do to defend it, they're going to lose. Okay? And the same thing does happen in the Aeneid. These prophecies of Aeneas being prophesied to succeed and to found Rome, but yet there's still these battles that take place. And so in a sense, I think that as modern storytellers, or modern readers, modern storytellers, modern thinkers, we want to have a certain type of conflict where it could go either way. But I think in the classical mindset, there's much more of a sense of predestination involved, predeterminism. And I don't mean predestination in a Calvinist or theological sense, because we've already seen Milton comment on that earlier, and I don't think he's returning to that type of commentary here. I think predestination more in the sense of prophecy, of futility, of standing and fighting even if it appears pointless to do so. And maybe I'm not explaining it well, but I think that that's a very different mindset that we as modern people don't grasp well. But to understand this type of poem, to understand the Iliad, to understand the Aeneid, we need to step out of the way we think about conflict in stories and step more into a classical mindset where it isn't so much about being on pins and needles to find out what's going to happen, or even being invested in the characters as they, if we know the ultimate fate of how this is going to go, which we certainly do, based on the fact that we've already seen the middle part of the story, chronologically speaking, where Satan is going to get cast down to hell. But even for us, we want to kind of be invested in the characters as they seek to find out what happens. This isn't about that. This is a different type of storytelling here that is about watching what will happen, what must happen, what is fated to happen, unfold, and seeing the glorious deeds which Milton makes clear are done on both sides here. The glorious type of fighting, the heroism, the brilliance of it, watching that unfold as almost a form of liturgy leading up to what is inevitable. Okay? So I don't know entirely if that makes sense. I hope it does. I hope you at least have some kind of idea of what I'm talking about. But I think maybe that kind of, it's not exactly liturgy, but that might be the best way to understand it. That our combatants here are taking part in what they know is a predetermined outcome, simply because it's what they must do, because that they are destined to be a part of it. They are, it's more about being caught up in something greater than yourself than it is their own particular journeys to find out what will happen. Okay? So, enough about that. Hopefully it makes sense. If it doesn't, I apologize. Okay? Lines, and this is still Abdiel talking, lines 183 to 185. He kind of echoes the better to reign in hell than serve in heaven line. He says, reign thou in hell thy kingdom, still talking to Satan here. Let me serve in heaven, God ever blessed in his divine behests obey, worthiest to be obeyed. And then he goes on to say, well, by the way, when you get down to your little kingdom in hell, you're not going to like it so much because you're actually going to be in chains. So Abdiel really wants to rub it in. So a lot of what we, a lot of what we have to experience in this book then isn't so much picking apart a theological point like we've done in previous books. It isn't so much, some of the really digging into the characterizations like we saw with Adam and Eve, and we're seeing parallels unfold. I think it's really, this book is more about calling us to be a part of that liturgical experience as we too watch this battle unfold, as we too get caught up in something beyond us, something predetermined, and we watch destiny take its course before our eyes. So to that end, I want to read a somewhat extensive excerpt here, going from lines 203 to 253, where Milton really just describes the battle. Because I think that's the way to experience this book. It isn't so much to dive into every little detail, but to hear it and let what happens in this battle wash over you. That's how Book 6 is meant to be experienced, in my opinion. And of course, I could be wrong about that. But let me just read this, and if there's things that hop out as we're reading that are deserving of commentary, I will make those known. All right. So, whereat Michael bids sound the Archangel Trumpet, beginning in line 203, or 202, I apologize. The Archangel Trumpet, through the vast of heaven it sounded, and the faithful armies rung, Hosanna to the highest, nor stood at gaze the averse legions, nor less hideous joined the horrid shock. Now storming fury rose, and clamor such as heard in heaven till now was never. Arms on armor clashing brayed horrible discord, and the maddening wails of brazen chariots raged. Dire was the noise of conflict. Overhead the dismal hiss of fiery darts and flaming volleys flew. Again, this is kind of that classical sense of combat. You know, we've got fiery arrows and chariots and all that good stuff. And flying vaulted either host with fire. So under fiery cope together rushed both battle's main, and with ruinous assault and inextinguishable rage all heaven resounded. And had earth been then, all earth had to her center shook. What wonder when millions of fierce encountering angels fought on either side, the least of whom could wield these elements and arm him with the force of all their regions, how much more of power army against army, numberless to raise, dreadful combustion warring and disturb, though not destroy their happy native seat. Had not the eternal King omnipotent from his stronghold of heaven high overruled and limited their might. That's just brilliant, as Milton's like, okay, there, you know, millions of angels with the power to wield the entire universe as a weapon, and would have been able to pretty much do untold damage. And God, as he's allowing this battle to take place, basically puts an upper limit on what they can do so that they don't ruin everything as they fight. I mean, that's simply a stunning, stunning visual. Though numbered such as each divided legion might have seemed, a numerous host, in strength each armed hand a legion led in fight, yet leader seemed each warrior, single as in chief, expert when to advance or stand, or turn to the sway of battle, open when, and when to close the ridges of grim war. No thought of flight, none of retreat, no unbecoming deed that argued fear, each on himself relied, as only in his arm the moment lay of victory. Deeds of eternal fame were done, but infinite. For wide was spread that war, and various, sometimes on firm ground, a standing fight, then soaring on main wing, tormented all the air. All air seemed then conflicting fire. Long time in even scale the battle hung, till Satan, who had that day prodigious power had shown, and met in arms no equal, ranging through the dire attack of fighting seraphim, confused, at length saw where the sword of Michael smote, and felled squadrons at once. I mean, that's, you know, you get a sense too here of, and I know that I'm kind of stopping mid-thought as Satan's like, oh, there's Michael, I'm going to go fight him. But just that kind of throwaway image of that Michael sitting there with his sword, and whatever it happens to be that he's doing, which I think we are meant to not be able to entirely picture. In fact, I know that because that's what Raphael says to Adam, right? In the last book, he said, I'm going to try and describe this to you, but use the best words I can, but even those are going to be inadequate. But Michael's sitting there, doing the thing with the sword, and entire squadrons going all at once. And we know how powerful each of these angels are. Just incredible. So, sword of Michael and felled squadrons at once, with huge two-handed sway, brandished aloft, the horrid edge came down, wide-wasting. Whereat Michael bid sound, you know what, I screwed up my... Nope, that's where I wanted to stop. I accidentally pasted it in here twice. Okay, my own problem with my notes here. But, just that incredible image. And then we get the whole thing where Satan is kind of sort of wounded, but not wounded. In his battle with Michael. And so we get some more on angelic bodies, or bodies in quotes here, and how angels can wound each other, but it's not a permanent thing. And I think that we find ourselves grasping for words to really describe what Milton is getting at, which again is very much the point. Because we're meant to be just in awe of something beyond us, which goes back to that liturgical point. And let me just flesh that out a little bit more for those who maybe aren't in liturgical religious traditions, or non-religious, or maybe have had experience of liturgy but never really had anybody explain to them what was going on, which unfortunately is far too often the case. But liturgy is meant to be, and I'm speaking here from my experience as a Catholic, so primarily from the Catholic Mass, but I think there's some universal statements we can make across all religions that practice liturgy. But liturgy is meant to be something beyond our comprehension, right? So if we think about this from my own Catholic experience, and whether or not you agree with Catholic doctrine isn't the point. I just want you to get a feel for what liturgy is meant to do, and then help that to kind of explain what Milton's trying to do. So in Catholic doctrine, or in the Catholic Mass, we're meant to somehow be transcending time and space so that the moment of Christ's sacrifice becomes present to us there at the Mass. We transcend the laws of logic and sense as the bread and wine remain physically bread and wine but become spiritually the body and blood of Christ. And what the liturgy is our small way of participating, getting a glimpse into what really are inexplicable mysteries. And we can talk all day about things like transubstantiation and how does this actually work and everything. But at the end of the day, we're just assigning feeble words to something that is fundamentally beyond the ability to understand, let alone put into words. It is the ineffable. That is what is going on at the Mass. It is the meeting of heaven and earth in a way that transcends everything that we could ever understand. And that same concept, albeit with different purposes and different words and different traditions and everything, I think is universal across all religions that practice liturgy and all liturgical practices. Liturgy is fundamentally the way of invoking that which is beyond understanding. And that's why I think liturgy, understanding this book as liturgy, is a big part of what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be getting that glimpse into the ineffable. We're getting that glimpse into what we can't understand, which is millions of angels going at it in an all-out brawl. Okay? So if we struggle to visualize this, if we struggle to understand exactly what Milton's saying, that's the point. You're supposed to be confused here. But not confused in the sense where I'm not following what's happening, but confused in the sense that says, I hear what he's saying, I can't possibly picture it, it's beyond me, but yet, what a gift to be able to gaze upon this incredible battle that Milton is giving us a glimpse into. Okay? So that's more of what I'm getting at. Again, I hope that's clear. So then, as the battle goes on and we're all busy fighting each other, Satan's army starts building cannons. And I think we're supposed to here very much note how anachronistic this is, how much of a sharp divide there is between what Satan and his armies do now and the type of warfare that has led up to this point. And Milton makes that point in that section I read of how you've got deeds of infinite fame being won by, all over the place, and there's this incredible classical clash of arms, but then Satan and his army step out of that, right? They step out of that classical, dare I say, honorable, even if their task isn't honorable, but their style of fighting up till this point is glorious and honorable. And worthy of this type of clash, and then they step beyond that and start building cannons. It's meant to trigger in us that they are now they are now crossing a line. They're crossing a line in the type of battle that they're engaging in. They're crossing a line of what ought to be acceptable for the combatants in this fight, and that ought to trigger to us that something, the stakes are being raised and this thing is soon going to culminate, right? And culminate it does, as Michael and his angels, again, one of these just incredible, almost unbelievable images of mountains being raised up and crash down onto Satan and his minions. And again, we're not supposed to even necessarily be able to understand how that's possible. We're just supposed to, as best we can, see it as symbolic of the type of fighting that is engaged in going on here. Okay, and then God says, enough is enough. It's time to get the sun involved. And you should note, of course, that the sun goes to war on the third day. Not accidental timing, of course. The third day being the day of the resurrection. So that's when it's time to put an end to this and send Satan and his fellows to hell. And so he does, and once the sun gets into the battle is as good as over. He binds up Satan and all the demons, he sends them falling to hell. They fall for 9 days, and that is that. And then the book closes with one final warning from Raphael to Adam, again, kind of where we started in Book 5, the Book of Warnings, as we talked about, that look, what you just heard isn't irrelevant because this guy is now on the loose and he's coming for you. So, there you have it, Book 6, the book that is stunning in its visuals but also very difficult to grasp. If you struggled with this one or found it amazing, I think I could understand both of those reactions. My encouragement would just be, let this book just wash over you. Don't try and, pick it apart. I'm sure there are people who have and probably done an amazing job. But for us laymen, and laywomen, of course, probably the best thing is to just experience it in the way that Raphael wants Adam to experience it. Let it be that liturgical experience. So, hopefully you're enjoying that. We're halfway through the book now, and I will be back next week sometime with Book 7. But that is all for now. I'm Bandy Bono, and this is Sci-Fi Christian. Goodbye.